You are welcome to Skilligent Hands YouTube channel. Skilligent Hands is an educational hub that is focused at offering educational services in forms of educational content, teachers training, online and physical tutorial for students, and student trainings and a host of other services, among which are also educational consultancy services. In this video, we are going to be looking at change of subject of formula, and this is coming from the stable of MATHSmanual. MATHSmanual is one of the products or package from Skilligent Hands, which is aimed at solving mathematics topics using the step-by-step approach. I would like you to join me as we move on in this video. We are going to be starting with an icebreaker, and the icebreaker goes thus: if George is the son of Mark, then who is Mark to George? The answer is not far-fetched. Mark is the father of George. This icebreaker is talking about relationships. Looking at it, it is similar to what we want to learn in this video, which is all about change of subject of formula. When George was the subject of relationship, he was called the son. And when Mark was the subject of the relationship, he was called father. This analogy can help us to understand the concept of change of subject of formula very well. So I would like you to join me as we venture into the concept of change of subject of formula. A mathematical formula shows relationships between one or more variables, usually in the form of an equation. There are two sides of a formula or equation. It is separated by the equal sign. Thus, the two sides are the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The variable on the left side is taken or referred to as the subject of the formula or equation or relationship. It is the term that is being defined by the term or terms on the right-hand side. Example: in the formula A equals to L times B, A is the subject of the formula because it occupies the subject position. That is, it is isolated, standing alone. This implies that A can be defined as the multiplication of L and B, which is the length and breadth. So these are just some things you need to know in order to help you understand the concept of change of subject of formula. So what is this concept all about? So we are going to look at it in two ways. Number one, when we talk about change of subject of formula, it is an attempt to make one of the variables on the RHS to be the subject of the relationship. And by change, you simply mean a new variable will now occupy the position of the variable on the LHS, while the one on that LHS before will now occupy the position on the RHS. It will be transferred to the right hand side. Okay, you have to possess some skills in order to enjoy your solving problems on change of subject of formula. Number one skill, you need to have a good skill in basic arithmetic. By this, you should be able to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division operations. You must also understand fractions and decimals. You also need to understand variables and constants. You should know the difference between variables. What are variables? Letters representing unknown values. And constants, they are fixed numerical values. You should also have the knowledge of algebraic operations. And what this simply means is that you should be able to perform operations involving variables, such as combining like terms. Another thing is that you must be good in your equations and inequalities. You must be able to solve simple linear equations and inequalities, I should also understand how to manipulate equations to isolate a variable. Still on these skills, you need to know about square roots and exponents, basic manipulation of square root and exponents, and knowing how to simplify expressions involving exponents. You also need to be familiar with order of operations, applying the correct order of operations. You have the PEMDAS and the BODMAS. PEMDAS means parentheses, E stands for exponent, M stands for multiplication, D stands for division, A stands for addition, S stands for subtraction. Under BODMAS, B stands for bracket, O stands for off, D stands for division, M stands for multiplication, A stands for addition, S stands for subtraction. All these operations you must be able to follow the order in multi-step calculations. Another thing you need to do, you should be able to rearrange your equations. You have to be comfortable with moving terms from one side of an equation to the other. And you should understand how to keep the equation balanced while rearranging it. This simply means that you must be versatile in solving equations, in taking variables from the left hand side to the right hand side with considerations of the operations involved. Then you need to understand functions, familiarity with simple functions, and how to manipulate them. You must also know how to substitute values into functions. Now, this is actually the core of this video. This video is meant to teach you 3 steps, just 3 steps. Very simple, 3 steps to change the subject of formula of any equation or any formula. Number 1 step is identify the new subject. When you are given any question under this topic, the first thing is that you identify the new subject, that is the variable that will now serve as the new subject, the variable that will be occupying the position of the subject. We go to the second step. The second step is that you isolate the new subject. What do we mean by isolation? That is, you separate that new subject. You let it to stand alone. You remove every attachment that might be with it. Any coefficient, it could be attached to any other variable or any number through multiplication, through division, through addition, through subtraction, through any operation. You must learn how to isolate it. Then the last point is that you simplify if necessary, because the second step is where the bulk of the work is. So the third step is just for you to simplify and make your work fine. So you combine like terms and you simplify the equation. So briefly, we'll just look at tips for isolating the new subject. Like I said, isolating the new subject is actually the major work. And what this means is that you want to make this new subject to stand alone. This is one of the difficult tasks for students. So you also need to understand the concept of operations and their inverse. What does it mean? This simply means that every operation has their inverse. Just like words and opposite in English language, you have go. The opposite of go is come. The opposite of buy is sell. We can go on and on like that. In mathematics also, we have operations and their inverse. For example, if we want to isolate A from C equals to A plus B, what you do is that you have to subtract letter B from both sides. Why? Because subtraction is the inverse operation of addition. Addition is the operation linking A and B. So we are going to subtract B from both sides. So we have A plus B minus B equals to C minus B. On the left hand side, B minus B will give us 0. So we are left with A. On the left hand side, we are left with C minus B. So the last line gives us the final answer. So A is now the new subject. Coming back to operations and their inverse. These are examples of operations and their inverse. The first one is addition. The inverse of addition is subtraction. We also have multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. We also have square. The inverse of square is square root. We can go on and on like that. As you expose yourself to more questions, you will get familiar with the concept of operations and their inverse. We will look at some examples following the steps that we have established. The first question here says, make R the subject of the relation V equals to IR. Following our steps, step 1 says identify the new subject. From the question, the new subject is R. So we are done with step 1. So we move on to step 2. What does step 2 says? Step 2 says isolate the new subject. If you are going to isolate the new subject, you will rewrite the equation or formula. Looking at this equation, we want to isolate R, but something is holding on to R. Letter I is attached to R. So we need to look at it. What is the operation that is attaching I and R together? From here, we see that I is attached to R by the operation multiplication. So for us to isolate it, we have to divide both sides by the inverse of multiplication, which is division. So we divide both sides by that letter which is attached to R, which is I. So when we do that, we are going to have V over I equals to IR over I. Then the I on the RHS, which is right hand side, we cancel out the I at the numerator. So we are going to be left with V over I equals to R. If you look at this equation very well, you discover that R is now isolated, though R is on the RHS, and that will now lead you to step 3 that says simplify if necessary. And the only simplification that we'll be doing is to rearrange in order to place letter R on the left hand side, and that gives us R equals to V over I. QED, quite easily done. You have your answer. We take another example. This example is saying make letter L the subject of the relation P equals to 2L plus 2W. To solve this, we use our 3 steps approach. Step 1, identify the new subject. From the question, we already know our new subject. The new subject is letter L. If we look at it, it takes us to step 2. We will need to isolate the new subject. The new subject is letter L. For us to isolate letter L, we need to look at the equation very well. L is attached to 2 by multiplication operation, and this 2 is also linked to another variable 2W by addition. So to solve this, you will need to first of all isolate 2L before isolating L. For you to isolate 2L, you subtract both sides using 2W. That is, you subtract 2W from both sides. After that, you now isolate L by dividing both sides by 2. So let's look at what we are saying. P equals to 2L plus 2W. So we isolate 2L by subtracting 2W from both sides. That gives us P minus 2W equals to 2L plus 2W minus 2W. On the right hand side, 2W we cancel out. So we are going to be left with P minus 2W equals to 2L. Then we have P minus 2W equals to 2L. For us to isolate L, we now divide both sides by 2. And that gives us P minus 2W, everything over 2, equals to 2L divided by 2. If we look at the right hand side, the 2 as the denominator, we cancel out the 2 as the numerator. And that will give us P minus 2W over 2 equals to L. And that is our answer. But we need to simplify and make our work neat. And that will lead us to step 3, which talks about simplify if necessary. So what do? We rearrange this answer in order to bring L to the left hand side. And that gives us P minus 2W equals P minus 2W over 2. Okay, I have this for you. You can practice this at your leisure. Number 1, V equals to U plus AT. You have to make A the subject. Number 2, P equals to 2 pi R. You make R the subject. Then number 3, we have A equals to pi uppercase R square minus lowercase r square. You have to make the uppercase R the subject. Then number 4, Y equals to mx plus C. You make C the subject. Follow for more videos to learn how to solve more difficult questions on the change of subjects of formulas. I want to believe you have gained something in this video. Subscribe to our channel, Skilligent Hands. Thank you very much.